na Holanda. Nós vamos passar à assinatura de um conjunto de protocolos, mas antes disso, permitam-me que vos possa deixar aqui algumas palavras, não só para as pessoas que estão aqui connosco hoje, mas também para aqueles que nos estão a ouvir lá em casa, sobre a Convenção de Faro. Não vos quero tomar muito tempo, mas parece-me importante também, num dia em que comemoramos efetivamente essa Convenção, que possamos efetivamente falar sobre ela, porque muitas vezes detemos-nos também nas questões mais institucionais e a questão do conteúdo, que naturalmente é o que nos traz cá, também passa. E, portanto, se me permitirem, com a vossa permissão, vou-vos ler aqui um pequeno texto que fala sobre esta Convenção Quadro sobre o património cultural para a sociedade, para as sociedades, que é um tratado do Conselho da Europa e que foi formalizado em 2005 aqui em Faro. A Convenção funde-se na ideia de que o conhecimento e o usufruto do património são relevantes para o direito da participação dos cidadãos na vida cultural, conforme está definida na Declaração Universal dos Direitos do Homem. O seu texto apresenta o património cultural como um recurso útil para o desenvolvimento humano, para a valorização da diversidade cultural e a promoção do diálogo intercultural, mediante um modelo de desenvolvimento económico fundado no princípio da utilização sustentável dos recursos. Apesar dos seus 16 anos de vida, a Convenção continua a ser um tratado bastante contemporâneo e não estaremos a exagerar ao dizer que é, a par de outros tratados, como o Tratado de Granada ou de La Valeta, um dos mais importantes na área do património na Europa e, por consequência, no mundo. É em cima deste legado vivo que queremos, através de mais um passo que damos aqui hoje, construir mais camadas que possam cimentar a importância da Convenção, mas, acima de tudo, cimentar os objetivos que ela representa e aquilo que ela defende. É nesse sentido que temos procurado desenvolver um conjunto de atividades que possam, de alguma forma, aproximar a cidade que dá nome à Convenção ao espírito da própria Convenção, e é assim que surge também a possibilidade desta tripla parceria entre o município de Faro, a Universidade Técnica de Delft, não sei se é assim exatamente a designação, a Universidade Técnica de Delft, na Holanda, e a Universidade do Algarve. E, por isso, vamos assinar hoje 2 protocolos, um entre o município de Faro e a Universidade de Delft, e outro entre o município de Faro e a Universidade do Algarve. Eu vou-vos fazer uma brevíssima apresentação de cada um dos protocolos, não vos vou estar aqui a amassar a ler todas as cláusulas que, que constam destes protocolos, e começaria pelo protocolo entre o município de Faro e a Universidade Tecnológica de Delft. Portanto, a Convenção de Faro marca um ponto de viragem no pensamento patrimonial, ao entender o património cultural como matéria que é de todos e para todos e que deve ser responsabilidade de todos e onde todos têm o poder de participar. Esta valorização do papel individual e coletivo da sociedade no âmbito do património, que sem este perde o seu verdadeiro sentido, é o que o município de Faro e a candidatura de Faro à Capital Europeia da Cultura 2027 pretendem perpetuar com a criação de uma conferência internacional dedicada à Convenção de Faro. A Universidade Tecnológica de Delft destaca-se na área do património cultural, sobretudo com o trabalho que desenvolve no âmbito da Cátedra Unesco, Heritage and the Reshaping of Urban Conservation of Sustainability, e da Cátedra Heritage and Values, na investigação e dinamização de vários estudos e iniciativas. A colaboração no âmbito do trabalho da Convenção deve ser estreitada e promovida para o desenvolvimento de um programa de ação que promova o espírito da mesma e a aproxime da cidade que lhe confere o nome. É a intenção do município de Faro, ao estabelecer este protocolo, criar uma colaboração que vise que esse mesmo trabalho resulte na realização de iniciativas ligadas à Convenção que contribuem para o desenvolvimento cultural e social do município. Temos em vista a criação de uma conferência internacional da Convenção de Faro, a cada ano, por ocasião do aniversário da sua assinatura, que possa expor e debater os vários princípios estabelecidos no documento. Adicionalmente, e para além deste trabalho conjunto e tripartido para a construção anual dessa conferência internacional, Este protocolo reflete ainda um conjunto de outras iniciativas, mas especificamente uma outra iniciativa que procurará trazer também estudantes da Universidade de Delft a Faro para poderem, em conjunto com a cidade, ou na cidade, com a cidade e na cidade, poderem aplicar um conjunto de conhecimentos que na universidade estão a aprender. Portanto, esta é a base do protocolo entre o município de Faro e a Universidade Técnica de Delft, que eu convidava agora o Sr. Presidente da Câmara e a professora Ana Roders a assinarem. Muito obrigado. Permitam-me agora que vos fale... Façam um favor. Permitam-me agora que vos fale do protocolo a ser assinado e formalizado entre o município de Faro e a Universidade do Algarve. A Universidade do Algarve tem-se vindo a destacar na área de investigação de temáticas como o património, a sustentabilidade e o turismo, sobretudo com trabalhos desenvolvidos pelas várias faculdades, escolas e centros de estudos e investigações. A Universidade do Algarve está intimamente ligada ao território em que se insere e, neste caso, a Faro, que muito tem contribuído para o desenvolvimento do território a diversos níveis. A Universidade do Algarve tem sido um parceiro fundamental na construção de dinâmicas regionais, nacionais e internacionais, que, a partir de Faro para o mundo, têm contribuído para a criação e para a disseminação do conhecimento. Desde sempre, a Universidade do Algarve tem sido uma importante âncora para a criação de estratégias, programas e projetos na região, e disso são exemplos diversos e importantes projetos que tem apoiado e que tem desenvolvido. Com este protocolo, pretende-se que as partes façam uma aproximação no que respeita às matérias ligadas ao património, nomeadamente à Convenção de Faro, sendo de igual relevância a importância da participação da Universidade do Algarve no desenho e construção de programas e projetos que possam interligar a Convenção de Faro ao território de Faro e ao território do Algarve. Eu convidava agora o Sr. Presidente da Câmara Municipal e o professor Dr. Nuno Bicho para assinarem o protocolo. Firmados que estão os tratados, passamos então a escutar os intervenientes e eu convidava por esta ordem o professor Nuno Bicho para intervir, seguido da professora Ana Rita Roders e finalmente o Sr. Presidente da Câmara. Sr. Professor, faça favor.
Muito bom dia a todos. Eu naturalmente quero cumprimentar o Sr. Presidente da Câmara de Faro, penso que posso dizer caro colega Rogério Bacalhau. Naturalmente, cumprimentar também a minha colega Deft, que também é professora e, portanto, estamos, enfim, sintonizados neste trabalho. Cumprimentar, enfim, todos os responsáveis institucionais que, porventura, nos possam estar a ver e a ouvir. Tenho que cumprimentar e dizer um olá a todos os meus colegas agentes culturais de todo o tipo, forma e variedade. Também alunos e alunas, enfim, sendo professor, não posso deixar de dizer esta frase, e, naturalmente, senhoras e senhores que nos estão a ver aqui e remotamente. Há 16 anos foi assinada a chamada Convenção de Faro, com ratificação por perto de uma trintena de países do Conselho da Europa. Desde então, multiplicaram-se, ainda que nunca em número suficiente, ações que permitiram e que permitem todos os dias que todos nós tenhamos a liberdade de usufruir, estudar e proteger o património cultural. Isto é, tudo o que material ou imaterialmente represente, ilustre e identifique a nossa cultura e o passado de cada grupo, comunidade, sociedade e nacionalidade, todas elas parte de um todo que é a humanidade. No seu preâmbulo, a Convenção de Faro afirma que todas as pessoas têm o direito a interagir com o património cultural de sua escolha dentro dos direitos e liberdades dos outros. Tal ideia, a que defende os direitos culturais, inclui não só o direito à identidade e ao património cultural, mas também o direito dos cidadãos à identificação com a comunidade cultural de sua escolha e o direito à educação e formação, à comunicação e informação e à participação nas políticas culturais. A missão de todas as instituições que trabalham com cultura e conhecimento, e em particular as universidades, passa também por estes objetivos. A democratização, e eu quero sublinhar a democratização do acesso à cultura, à participação e o desenvolvimento ativo de ações que permitam aos cidadãos, não só os estudantes, docentes e investigadores dessas instituições, mas à sociedade em geral, usufruir e participar na cultura nas suas mais variadas expressões. O elemento identificador das universidades como agentes culturais e desenvolvimento da ciência e de conhecimento é o conhecimento. Sabemos que para protegermos esse conhecimento, desfrutarmos e divulgarmos o património cultural, precisamos de o conhecer. Que para o conhecimento é fundamental a convergência entre as instituições que estudam e cuidam do património e a sociedade que dele deve usufruir. É essa mesma sociedade que tem o direito e a responsabilidade de também participar ativamente na construção das políticas e práticas culturais. Sabemos que o estabelecimento de vias permanentes de diálogo entre as instituições, nomeadamente as universidades e as autarquias, é essencial para que o património cultural seja um fator de coesão social e desenvolvimento sustentável e que seja um dos vetores de cidadania e de respeito mútuo. Consciente destas necessidades, a Universidade do Algarve tem-se empenhado na oferta formativa em várias áreas do património: arqueológico, artístico, cultural, geológico, histórico, literário, linguístico, entre muitos outros. Desde a sua criação, com o apoio claro e inequívoco da região e das suas autarquias, a UALG, a Universidade do Algarve, tem-se também aplicado no estabelecimento de parcerias e iniciativas que permitem a criação e transferência de conhecimentos, de práticas e de concepções de novas realidades para o usufruto cultural ao nível local, regional, nacional e mesmo internacional. É, por conseguinte, com empenho acrescido que agora, em representação do magnífico reitor, professor Paulo Águas, e da Universidade do Algarve, que assino hoje este memorando. Memorandos, uma vez que serão assinados, ou que foram assinados aqui hoje, 2, e que permitirá a Faro ir mais longe na promoção, na cooperação e parceria no âmbito das celebrações do 20º aniversário da Convenção sobre o valor do património cultural para a sociedade. Estamos certos de que, com estes parceiros, a Câmara Municipal de Faro e a Cátedra Heritage and Values da Universidade Tecnológica de Delft, aos quais desejamos que outros parceiros locais, regionais e internacionais se venham a juntar, será possível criar novas sinergias que desenvolvam os objetivos da Convenção de Faro. Muito obrigado.
Vamos lá. Bom dia a todos. Desde já gostaria de agradecer à Câmara de Faro e a todos vós, e em particular ao Presidente Rogério Bacalhau, por ter a coragem de endossar e desenvolver e organizar esta iniciativa e este futuro pacote de trabalhos. Gostaria também de... é um pouco difícil falar em português neste momento. Já estou há muito tempo na Holanda, mas vou tentar. Perdoem-me se falar assim um bocadinho mais imigrante. Mas, de facto, estou muito contente de aqui estar, principalmente por ser Portugal, não é? Trabalhamos com países e câmaras do mundo inteiro, mas é sempre mais especial se trabalho com Portugal, com câmaras em Portugal e, em especial, com o Faro, que foi a quem deu o nome à Convenção de Faro e que é uma madrinha, uma cidade madrinha que eu espero que nos anos que chegam nos próximos anos que podemos fazer muitas coisas interessantes em torno da Convenção de Faro. Este diálogo começou há mais de um ano e por isso gostaria muito de mencionar o Bruno Inácio, a vereadora a Sofia, a Matias, os colegas Teresa Valente, Ana Tarrafa, Tiago Candeias e Bruno de Andrade, que são os verdadeiros cérebros por trás de toda esta iniciativa super inovativa e que ligam a Universidade do Algarve, à Câmara de Faro e à nossa Universidade Técnica de Delft, na Holanda. Em especial, estes parabéns não são só à Câmara de Faro, mas também à Convenção de Faro, que hoje faz anos, não é? Ainda não tem a maioridade, ainda é uma teenager de 16 anos. Lá chegaremos nos próximos anos. E eu acho que Faro e Portugal foi muito pioneiro em ratificar e assinar esta convenção, que mesmo a Holanda e outros países da Europa ainda não tomaram o passo de o fazer. E eu acho que é exatamente esta reflexão que vamos fazer aqui nos próximos anos e como se diz, host, que se vai acontecer aqui nesta cidade, como um observatório que dará esse apoio de chegar à maturidade que ainda não tem. Portanto, já foram dadas algumas palavras de introdução à Convenção de Faro, não vos vou avançar ou dar uma aula, ainda que seja a minha natureza, não é? Mas vou tentar ser um pouco mais curta. Mas a verdade é que a Convenção de Faro é mesmo muito inovativa e liga o património às temáticas dos direitos humanos, da democracia e de certa forma é contraditório, porque património é uma eleição, é uma seleção. E nem sempre essa seleção foi feita de forma muito inclusiva e com uma consultoria com as comunidades. Era mais elitista, mais de especialistas. Portanto, é tudo um novo processo de repensar e a forma como influenciou o desenvolvimento sustentável das cidades, as transformações, não é? O que poderia ser transformado e o que não poderia ser transformado. Tudo isso vai ser questionado, ou pode ser questionado, se realmente a Convenção de Faro for adiante na sua implementação, que ainda está, como eu disse, ainda não está em maioridade. Portanto, ainda não tem independência para tal. E, por isso, o texto nem sequer fala de monumentos, não fala de centros históricos, não fala de arqueologia. É mesmo muito abrangente, cabe à sociedade decidir o que é o património e, a partir de então, seja fado, ou seja uma igreja, ou seja um campo arqueológico, se a comunidade assim o decidir, desenvolver tecnologias e quadros legislativos que suportem essa conservação. Esta ligação aos direitos humanos é crucial e, por isso, a Convenção de Faro ainda não foi tão ratificada como poderia, e outras convenções ligadas ao património mundial. Faz uma ligação aos tribunais internacionais de direitos humanos, aos tribunais europeus, ligada ao Conselho da Europa, e tudo isso traz novas questões. Portanto, é muito bem-vindo toda esta série de conferências e, mais uma vez, a Câmara de Faro está em parabéns, e o Presidente em particular, por realmente o proporcionar para ajudar os alunos, as novas gerações e os colegas com quem nós trabalhamos no momento, nas câmaras, nos governos nacionais e nas universidades, a repensar o que estamos a fazer e o quanto ajuda realmente este passo à frente na democracia e nos direitos humanos. Portanto, acho que já chega. Estou muito contente de estar aqui. Obrigada a todos e que seja o primeiro de muitos dias de trabalho em conjunto. Obrigada.
Bom, muito bom dia a todos. Gostava de cumprimentar o professor Nuno Bicho, diretor da Faculdade de Ciências Humanas e Sociais da nossa grande Universidade do Algarve. Estávamos aqui a comentar que há pouco mais de 20 anos fiz parte de uma equipa com o professor Nuno Bicho que escreveu os estatutos da faculdade na altura. Um cumprimento também à doutora Ana Pereira Roders, responsável pela Cátedra de Património da Universidade de Delft, e um agradecimento por estar aqui connosco e partilhar connosco os seus conhecimentos, a sua vivência, em particular nesta área do património e relacionado com a Convenção. Cumprimentar o Sr. Vice-Presidente, a Sra. Vereadora, a Sra. Diretora Regional da Cultura do Algarve, a doutora Adriana, que está sempre connosco nestas iniciativas, o Sr. Vice-Presidente da CCDR Algarve, o arquiteto José Pacheco, todos os técnicos da Câmara Municipal de Faro que estão hoje aqui a participar neste evento, mas também todos os outros que estão a assistir. Cumprimento todas as senhoras e senhores aqui presentes, os nossos ilustres convidados e todos aqueles que nos acompanham nestas novas tecnologias via plataforma digital. A todos, muito bom dia. É uma honra contar com a vossa presença nestes momentos de especial significado para a cultura em geral, mas para Faro em particular, e em particular por estarmos aqui neste belíssimo Teatro Letes que espelha muito a nossa cultura, a nossa identidade, e que hoje estamos aqui de alguma forma para celebrar essa mesma cultura. A Convenção Quadro do Conselho da Europa sobre o Valor do Património Cultural para a Sociedade, assinado aqui em Faro a 27 de outubro de 2005, sublinha a importância do património cultural enquanto parte integrante dos direitos do homem e da democracia, promovendo o entendimento alargado e interdisciplinar deste conceito e da sua relação com a sociedade por meio do estabelecimento de direitos e responsabilidades para com o mesmo. Embora tenha bebido o espírito de anteriores convenções do Conselho da Europa, como Granada e La Valeta, Florença, a Convenção de Faro marca um ponto de viragem no pensamento patrimonial, ao entender o património cultural como uma matéria que é de todos e para todos, que deve ser responsabilidade de todos e onde todos têm o direito a participar, sendo isso inerente ao direito à participação cultural definida na Declaração Universal dos Direitos Humanos, valorizando assim o papel individual e coletivo da sociedade no âmbito do património, que sem este perde o seu verdadeiro sentido. Aprovada 18 de julho de 2008 e em vigor desde 2011, a Convenção leva-nos a reconhecer que os objetos patrimoniais propriamente ditos assumem a sua verdadeira importância nos significados e usos que cada um de nós, individual ou coletivamente, lhe atribui. E, consequentemente, nos valores que estes representam, focando sobretudo na promoção da sustentabilidade, do acesso e do uso da tecnologia digital no contexto do e no papel decisivo do valor acrescentado que as novas gerações e a criação contemporânea somam e integram na realidade cultural atual. Enquanto afirmação histórica de uma humanidade em constante evolução e de um fenómeno cultural em permanente mutação. Contando com 6 assinaturas e 21 ratificações até à data, este documento define o património comum da Europa como elemento dinamizador de uma cidadania aberta no qual se cruzam variadas pertenças e se dá o encontro entre herança, memória e criação, prevendo uma cultura de paz e respeito pela diferença, onde o património cultural desempenha um papel aglutinador e é fator de aproximação, compreensão e diálogo. É com esta definição alargada do conceito de património, o foco nas comunidades patrimoniais e o princípio de uma responsabilidade partilhada, que a Convenção busca formas criativas de gestão e desenvolvimento com base no envolvimento ativo da sociedade. Apesar dos seus já 16 anos, a atualidade da Convenção é inquestionável, trazendo à discussão questões atuais que importam ser debatidas e exploradas. É com isto em mente que o município assume a importância crucial desta Convenção, cujo nome é dado pela nossa cidade. Com a assinatura destes memorandos, pretendemos estreitar a colaboração com estas duas prestigiadas academias no sentido de desenvolver, debater e programar um futuro para este tão importante documento, que se foca, mais do que tudo, nas pessoas e na importância que elas assumem na nossa realidade cultural como agentes ativos e responsáveis. É assim nossa intenção poder trabalhar lado a lado e de forma próxima com a Universidade do Algarve e com a Cátedra da Unesco da Universidade de Delft, no debate, investigação e dinamização da Convenção de Faro, na esperança de que esta colaboração venha a resultar em várias iniciativas que culminem, mas não terminem, na comemoração em 2025 dos 20 anos da Convenção, aproximando-a cada vez mais da cidade que lhe dá o nome, Faro. Viva a Convenção de Faro, viva o respeito pelo património. Obrigado.
Muito obrigado a todos. Nós vamos fazer uma curta pausa para podermos fazer aqui algumas alterações estruturais para passarmos para a segunda fase desta iniciativa agora na parte da manhã. Agradecemos os que estiveram connosco e que terão que sair agora e também dar nota para quem nos está a assistir pelas nossas plataformas, que voltaremos cerca de dentro de 10 a 15 minutos, depois de prepararmos aqui tudo para vos receber. Muito obrigado a todos e muito bom dia.
Já está valendo? Ok. Sejam bem-vindos de volta. Welcome back, everyone. Now we shift from Portuguese to English in order to better accommodate all of our attendees from universities in Portugal, Netherlands, Belgium, Italy, Iran, and even Brazil. I'd like to welcome an amazing team of brilliant minds and hearts. You PhD candidates subscribed and were selected to join a panel that is looking at the future of heritage research, education, and practice. You are young academics and professionals ready to share your knowledge, exchange ideas, and be inspired by the Faro Convention that has now 16 years. How much have we advanced towards the value of heritage for society, and what are the new potentials in terms of methods and technological tools, and also the limitations and challenges to be faced, and how to engage citizens in the digital era. Social media, instant messages are replacing or adding to traditional methods such as interviews, cartography by Instagram, use and appropriation of the city by TikTok, and groups gatherings on Facebook groups, not to mention computer, video, and mobile games in a hybrid and augmented city, both real and virtual. Such are the challenges that we are facing in the digital era. And you were gathered in 2 groups according to your topics. And this is the Pecha videos that you organized between 5 and 6 minutes. We are going to have a sequence of these videos rolling from now on. But we have these 2 big groups. One is heritage and participation for sustainability. And some of the keywords of this group were participatory heritage practices, sustainable urban development, social sustainability, public participation, consensus building, big data and accessibility, in which participation plays an important role in sustainability. And the PhDs will discuss more about in their own case studies. And in this group, we have Ilaria Rossetti, Clara Bertrand Cabral, Sevin Sezi Karayazi, Marda Forogi, and Mona Azarnous. And in the second group, we have a topic, heritage and urban planning for sustainability, where the keywords were conservation, preservation, urban development, redesign, adaptive reuse, built heritage, territory, landscape, historic urban landscapes, cultural significance, and world heritage. And in this group, we gathered Ana Tarrafa Silva, Milin, Daniela Pereira Alves Ribeiro, Comal Potda, Federica Marullo, Bruna Ribeiro Nunes, Ricardo Rodrigues, and Nadia Pintossi. And also in order to select one of you as the ambassador and representative of the PhDs in the conference next year, we will have the support of 3 professors that I will introduce later on, Ana Catarina Marado, Ana Pereira Roders, and Teresa Ferreira. And you will be assessed in 3 criteria. That one of them is related to your PhD research structure, including research questions, goals, methodology, and expected results. Also, in the second one, how you reflect towards connecting your PhD research with the Faro Convention principles. And a third criteria related to how would you see built heritage coping with the digital era. So now we are ready to start rolling the videos, and the first one is Ilaria Rossetti. Thank you so much, and enjoy.
Hello, I'm Ilaria Rossetti. I'm a PhD candidate in Heritage Studies at the University of Antwerp in the Archives Research Group, and guest PhD at TU Delft in the UNESCO Chair Heritage and Values, Heritage and the Reshaping of Urban Conservation for Sustainability. In our globalized world, we're facing many common challenges which make a more sustainable development our common priority, and cities an increasingly important stage where change can happen. Urban heritage in all forms and its management processes can play a crucial role in fostering or not sustainable urban development, and people are the key actors of change towards more sustainability-oriented practices. The participation of multiple stakeholders in heritage practices is considered fundamental for heritage conservation, safeguarding, and good governance, and it has been widely researched and regulated across regions at different scales. However, research is mainly focused on specific case studies, while little attempts are being made to compare and theorize the wide spectrum of participatory heritage practice contribution to sustainable development objectives. Through my doctoral research, I want to address that gap by theorizing the different roles that stakeholders' participation in heritage processes can play and develop an assessment framework that enables the analysis of the factors that affect the good or the less intended outcomes and impact of participation. To do that, first, I have analyzed relevant literature and international heritage regulations to identify the roles of participation and how they are regulated by different international organizations. 3 roles emerged: participation as a right, as a driver, and as an enabler of sustainable development, with 9 subcategories. They address different sustainable development objectives, and the enforcement of participation as a right can contribute to more just and equal societies. Participation as a driver addresses multiple goals beyond the social sustainability dimensions, and participation as an enabler creates the necessary basis to ensure that the goals addressed today would be addressed tomorrow. Then, I have developed an assessment framework in 3 phases, inspired by logical models, to understand current participatory heritage practices, analyze the factors that affect them and their outcomes, and eventually assess their potential impact on sustainable urban development. I have tested the framework through an international survey and workshop organized in collaboration with the Organization for Heritage Cities in occasion of its 14th World Congress. The study identified commonalities and differences in current participatory heritage practices in World Heritage Cities across all regions, and the challenges and opportunities for and of participation. The framework is being further refined and applied to assess how current participatory heritage practices contribute to sustainable urban development in the city of Antwerp, particularly within the 7 project on the redevelopment of an area in a multi-diverse neighborhood after the relocation of an historic hospital. The Faro Convention is the only regulatory framework out of the 29 I analyzed that addresses and promotes not only all three roles of participation, but also all their subcategories. Being the convention legally binding makes it one of the most influencing documents for the acknowledgement, regulation, and implementation of sustainability-oriented participatory heritage practices at a national level in a European context. The roles of participation in sustainability-oriented heritage practices can support the understanding of how heritage can be of value for society and how society can actively contribute to leveraging heritage practices for sustainable urban development. Looking at the participatory practices carried out for the implementation of the Faro Convention and assessing their roles can offer insights on how to better strategize, support, organize, monitor, and evaluate them to foster their optimal outcome and impact. Cities in Europe and worldwide can benefit from the use of this assessment framework to further understand current participatory heritage practices, their actors, and their dynamics, analyze the factors that affect them and their outcomes, and eventually assess their potential impact and sustainable urban development, enabling comparative analysis and mutual learning. The framework can be used to assess participation in large and small projects as part of the monitoring and evaluation cycle, supporting the learning process and informing future strategies. We live in a digital era where communication technologies connect us all as never before. Digital participation is therefore a key topic to address when planning participatory heritage practices. Participation in urban contexts can come with some challenges. Information and communication technologies, called ICT tools, can be part of these challenges, posing issues of accessibility and usability across generations, sectors, and geographical areas. On the other hand, ICT tools can also offer opportunities to address those challenges and foster participation. Particularly, they can greatly support education, training, and capacity building activities, effective communication for joint decision making, inclusive research and data collection, and participate in monitoring and evaluation processes, potentially contributing to a more sustainable, inclusive, and equitable urban development. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to many interesting discussions, debates, and events next year at the Faro Convention International Conference in Faro.
Good morning. I would like to present you my investigation on participation as a sustainability factor in the protection and safeguarding of cultural heritage, the historic urban landscape approach. My intention was to understand the meaning of participation in the cultural heritage area, and the recommendation on the historic urban landscape seemed the perfect document to start, because it recommends the use and the application of civic engagement tools. So I wanted to know what this meant and how the civic engagement tools could be designed and applied to enhance participation. My objective is to understand the relevance of participatory processes as sustainability factors in the protection and safeguarding of cultural heritage in historic urban landscapes. And my research question is, how can civic engagement tools contribute to the protection and safeguarding of cultural heritage in historic urban landscapes? I established 3 targets. The first one, to understand the theoretical foundations of the requirement to participate in heritage processes, which I accomplished through literature review. The second one, to examine the evolution of the provisions on participation in UNESCO and ACAMA's international doctrinal documents related to UNESCO 2011 recommendation. And for that, I made a content analysis of 13 documents related to this recommendation. And finally, a third target was to analyze the contribution of participatory processes to the protection and safeguarding of cultural heritage in the historical urban landscape approach, which I will still do through a case study of a Portuguese World Heritage Site. On this presentation, I will focus on the second target and in the content analysis of the 13 documents related to the recommendation on the historical urban landscape. These documents cover a time span since 1972, when the World Heritage Convention was adopted, until 2019, the date of the last version of the operational guidelines for the implementation of the World Heritage Convention. And what I tried to find in these documents is who participates, in which heritage areas, and how is participation accomplished. Because I believe that participation should be inclusive, extensive, and democratic, and these are the 3 areas I wanted to investigate. So I started by identifying in each document all the paragraphs and articles related to participation, and each of them start to identify who the participants are, in which areas of participation they worked, and which were the forms of participation recommended. In the documents, I found several categories of participants, like disadvantaged groups, bodies, specialists, public organizations, stakeholders, and some unspecified participants, and also some different areas of participation, like governance, identification, management, enhancement, education, transversal, and some unspecified areas. For the forms of participation, I identified 6 different forms based on literature review. Information, which is a more passive form, consultation, which includes inquiries and surveys, intervention, which entails action, partnership, decision, which involvement in decision making, and a generic category for all those forms of participation that are not defined in the documents. As you can see, the most used terms are the generic ones, followed by information, partnership, intervention, consultation, and decision. The results allow us to have a broad view of how participation is addressed in each one of the documents in absolute terms, but also in relative terms, which is rather interesting when we analyze it in detail. As you can see, along the years, there is a tendency for information to decline and a growth in the use of generic terms. On the other hand, there is also a slight decline in the use of consultation and a slight increase in the use of intervention, while partnerships and decisions, which is the less used form of participation, seem to remain the same through the years. The next step of the investigation will be to examine the relations between participants, the areas of participation, and the forms of participation. The expected results are a better understanding of participation in cultural heritage processes, namely in the historic urban landscape approach, to propose a methodology to assess objectively how participation is recommended in doctrinal documents, an enhanced knowledge of how civic engagement tools should be designed and applied, and contribute to achieve targets 11.3 and 11.4 of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This methodology has already been applied in another study of 7 documents, among which the Faro Convention, with these results. Thank you very much for your attention, and just let me know if you have any comments or suggestions.
Hello, welcome all. I'm Sezi Karayazı, PhD student from TUI Eindhoven, under the supervision of Professor Dr. Barko de Vries and Dr. Gamze Dane. My research title is Leveraging Newly Available Big Data for Equal Accessibility of Urban Architectural Heritage. For today, I will briefly follow this outline. It starts with a small introduction about me, and I explain my research with the research questions, methodology, expected results. Also, I will explain the relation of Faro Convention principles and the contribution of sustainability. As a researcher, I have a Bachelor and Master of Architecture degree from Turkey, and I completed CME in TUI Eindhoven. I have working experience about 5 years as an architect and conservation specialist. I started PhD 2 years ago, which is fully supported by Turkish government. At the beginning, I would like to ask you, how do you feel when you visit the heritage sites in a crowd as a tourist or as a local? As you know, the tourism industry focuses on economic growth, but it causes the distribution and it leads to new phenomenon, over-tourism. So there is a need to understand what makes over-touristified in heritage places, why people visit heritage, and what makes heritage sites attractive. Then, how to define visitors' distribution using urban big data. Then, how can new system be developed using big data for equal accessibility? To understand what is the current state of location-based big data in the context of urban heritage tourism, we divide into 4 groups to keywords: data source, heritage, tourism, and the settings. As you can see at the bottom, there is an increasing publishing trend in these studies. So the travel motivations explain with push and pull theory. Push factor is instinct behavior that motivates people to travel, and the pull factor is the travel decision caused by the attractive attributes. It depends on the location, for example, the heritage type, the heritage status, etc. Urban big data can be collected by the sensors or from social media or GPS trackers. The most important thing is human is the data sources, and this kind of data can be used for the destination management, mapping historical values, or the tracing tourist activities. So we conduct the bibliometric network to understand the relation of the keywords. As you can see, some keyword there is a lack of interconnection between some of the keywords. For example, heritage and the promotion, or heritage and the visitor. So our main research question is how can big data be leveraged for equal accessibility of urban architectural heritage areas under the pressure of overcrowd and over-tourism? I will explain sub-questions by relevant methodologies. We collect the attributes through the literature review, then we divide those attributes for the two groups, heritage environment and the heritage self-value. So for example, it could be tourist attraction in heritage environment, it could be either cultural activity or the leisure. These attributes will be analyzed by the stated choice experiment, and these experiments provide weights per attribute, and these attributes will be utilized with the social media sources. So for example, you can see the example of word cloud from Twitter with the sentiment analysis. So how can visitors distribution be defined using urban big data? As you can see, this is the Flickr photographs in years. Each year, the Flickr photographs cluster the different places of the cities. So network analysis can be helpful to understand. As a final product, we would like to propose an intelligent dashboard or conceptual framework to using big data. The previous steps, such as the discrete choice experiment and urban big data analysis, are the main input of the dashboard. As a final product, we would like to propose an intelligent dashboard or a conceptual framework, which is Amigo, Amsterdam's intelligent guide for the tourism. So it will basically based on the custom-made visit plan. The users need to specify their request, for example, their age, their travel partner, their interconnection, location choice, and how to access the heritage sites. Then the dashboard will show the suitable locations with the expected crowds using the universal traffic sign. The red places are highly crowded, yellow ones the medium crowd, and the green ones the less crowd. Then the users can choose. To understand which keywords are highlighted in Faro convention, I use a simple word cloud, and as you can see, the public, promote, respect, diversity, society, sustainability, and community are outstanding. And how the PhD research can contribute. Quickly, I did a few sentiment analysis tweets from the Faro. As you can see, the 70% of tweets are positive, so it can be analyzed why people's attitude are mostly positive or the negative. Our research contributes to sustainability considering heritage, tourism, and the big data. There is a need to understand what attracts people in the certain location. Although there are many heritage that need to be discovered, why people prefer to well-known places. Thank you for your attention. You can send all feedbacks and the questions to me.
Hello everyone. I'm Mona Azarnoush, PhD candidate at the Art University of Isfahan, Iran. Today I want to talk about the departure of the historical neighborhoods residents, a phenomenon that is currently seen in many small and medium-sized cities in Iran. This is a common problem that has spread like a pandemic. Historical neighborhoods that contain a large part of the valuable heritage have been abandoned, and now they are in danger of deterioration, decline, and may be cut off from the whole city. Small and mid-sized cities are so important. These cities are the interface between the producer and consumer society, and compared to large cities, their residents have a face-to-face connection and more peace, so the community has deep social ties and high social capital. But the importance of these cities in the eyes of governments is not as great as metropolises. For this reason, with the decrease in the population of cities and the increase in their distance from the provincial centers, the amount of attention, studies, and consequently the investment will decrease. Although out-migration is one of the main causes of population decline in such cities, the main issue of this study is the historical neighborhoods depopulation, which often occurs due to residents' relocation in the same city and outside the historical boundaries. Neighborhoods that have historically been inhabited by generations are now losing their residents. This is an important sign of a defect in a system. So the main questions that this dissertation seeks to answer are: why and how this happens? A case study of this research is the small town of Zavare, which is located next to the central desert of Iran. Despite the hot and dry climate, this city has a unique urban fabric that has largely maintained its integrity. Some of its architectural monuments are more than 500 years old. In this dissertation, I seek to understand the abandonment of the historical neighborhoods from an internal perspective and the context, not by considering the predetermined and assumed factors. So, I will explore the residents' relocation with a bottom-up view. For this reason, the research methodology is grounded theory, and the tools for collecting information are studying, observation, and interview. I am looking to explore the issue with the participation of inhabitants in the research. Since data coding is the most important analytical method in grounded theory, and due to the wide range of extracted codes, Atlas TI software is used to make analysis more regular. For the literature review, the systematic review method has been taken. In addition to answering the main questions, it is expected that in the end, the dissertation will determine how the stakeholders related to this process, also make the pull and push factors of historical neighborhoods clear. Despite the continuous depopulation and the increased age of residents, the relation between citizens and historical parts is considerable. Many people who live in the new districts refer to the neighborhoods daily, and some who have migrated from the city return at certain times. In this city, many traditional manufacturing occupations and handicrafts existed before. Currently, only a small number of them survive in the historical area, which shows the significant role of this section in the city's life. In the thesis, the relationship between the stakeholders, the factors that connect people to historical contexts, and the forces that draw residents out will identify. Also, the scale and the way of effective factors will recognize. One of the restrictions of such studies in small and mid-sized cities is the lack of digitally categorized information. For example, not having a database containing historical images, documentary sources, or demographic statistics adapted with historical scales and during different. Some of these shortcomings are related to the issue of reduced attention to such cities that I mentioned before. Having a digital database that provides such information to the researcher in a layer-by-layer and up-to-date form saves time and shortens the research path. I believe with my explanation, the connection between these theses and Faro became clear, but paying attention to the residents of historic neighborhoods as the most important factor in the conservation of its heritage is one of the mains. The study of this phenomenon in small and mid-sized cities is vital because it shows how such cities prepare to face the factors that may cause the displacement of residents. Does the planning pay enough attention to the consequences of the projects on the residing population? These cities have numerous assets which are dependent on historical neighborhoods. City planners and designers can use them for conservation, but in this process, the interaction with the institution of power that holds many tools should not be forgotten. If the population decline continues in these areas, the next generations will have no connection with the historic communities, and the loss of tangible and intangible heritage will be inevitable. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mahda Fouroughi, a PhD candidate at UNESCO Chair of Heritage and Value at TU Delft in Netherlands. My PhD focuses on public participation and consensus building in World Heritage Management. Values are playing an important role in our lives these days, and this is why we have many different organizations that are established to safeguard these values. Among these organizations, UNESCO is the one that is established to safeguard the values mostly related to the built environment. However, it doesn't go well always. Sometimes recognizing a city leads to over-tourism and endangers the social sustainability of the city. A famous case in point is Venice in Italy. In order to face this problem, literature suggests public inclusion in heritage management. Also, international documents suggest public inclusion. A good case in point is Faro Convention that considered cultural heritage as a resource for socially sustainable development. That can happen through public participation endorsing the public right to the heritage management. Historic urban landscape recommendation is another case in point that consider public participation as a tool for heritage management. However, the literature and the international documents rarely address the essential factors affecting public participation process. So this is why in my PhD, I focus on this issue. In order to do this, I focus on a case study, the historic city of Yazd in Iran, which was inscribed on UNESCO list in 2017. I chose this case study because I have access and knowledge about the city as it's my hometown. The main goal of my project is to reach a maximum consensus on the values and attributes of the World Heritage Cities through a public participation process involving digital technologies. I broke down my main goal to 4 issues: critical factors, key interest groups' perceptions, the conflicts among them, and lastly, reaching maximum consensus. My research questions follow my research goals. The main one is how to reach a maximum consensus on the values and attributes of the World Heritage Cities. And the others follows the 4 issues. This is part of the framework of my PhD. In the first work package, I did a broad systematic literature review to find out the factors that affect this process of public participation to reach consensus. Then the second and third work package, I focused on finding out the opinions of 4 main stakeholders: residents, tourists, authorities, and experts. I used Instagram, policy documents, and literature to find out the opinions of these groups. As my data was relatively big, I used artificial intelligence and precisely natural language processing techniques to analyze this data. I'm going to explain my method a little bit more. We use words to express our opinions, and this is the base of my method. I did text classification, and I used the framework of values developed by Professor Anna Pereira-Roders to code the values in my text. I brought this exemplary quote to make it more clear. I'm going to read the first one loud. We're visiting one of the most beautiful viewpoints in the world. From Art House, you can see a panoramic view of Yazd and its magic, Windcatcher, and Dam. My mother recognized aesthetical value for this quote because of the word beautiful. Also, it recognized the attributes in the text. I use this model for analyzing all my data. Of course, I did other analyses except for coding the value classes. I code the class of attributes, the association between these classes, the association between the most frequent values and attributes, emotion analysis, how people address emotions to different values, and also how different groups of stakeholders address to different values. This is very important because this is the moment where I can see the agreements and disagreements among different interest groups, and it helps me to reach consensus later on in my process. In my project, I try to respect public rights relating to cultural heritage as Faro Convention advised. I'm doing so by exploring the opinions of heritage communities and engaging a wider audience. Of course, when you have a wider audience, you will have conflicts and agreements, but these will help us to reach a consensus. And doing so help us to promote sustainability and access, especially using digital technology. I'm using digital technology to facilitate inclusive heritage management. I'm using social media as a complementary data source to other conventional data sources like interviews, literature, and policy documents. I'm doing so because social media platforms are easily accessible to everyone, and people are developing online discussions around heritage, about heritage in social media. So why not using them in our work and finding out the opinions of public? For example, if you search #Faro in Instagram, you will find out almost 2 million posts on the city. So my methodology not only can be applied on my case study, but can be applied on the city of Faro and also all the cities around the world. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation, and I hope to see you in the conference soon.
Hello, I'm Ana Terrafa Silva, and I'm a PhD candidate at UNESCO Share Heritage and Values based in TU Delft. This is my presentation video for this warm-up meeting to discuss the 2005 Faro Convention. I hope to raise interest in my PhD research topic and also to unveil the links with the Faro Convention, the contribution for aspiring cultural cities like Faro, and to the digital transition, in particular for heritage. As dynamic organisms, cities are the theatre of constant transformations. Those transformations, through development plans or projects, are often regulated by local planning policies, which are assumed to simultaneously enable change and the conservation of irreplaceable resources such as cultural heritage. However, studies have been shown that heritage keeps being addressed as an exception among urban planning policies and practices. Exceptions made with positive or negative purpose are often a way for exclusion or marginalization. This connotation may be influenced by the knowledge level about the object, or in this case, the awareness about the heritage values and attributes addressed by planning policies and tools and used by city managers both from heritage or urban planning fields. Draw on interviews and surveys to city managers from Faro and Porto, as well as on documental analysis, This research aims to unveil the integration degree between cultural heritage and urban planning policies, which means if heritage is being addressed as a burden, a resource, the process leader, or if there is even an actual integration. To reach it, we believe that it is critical to understand what are the values addressed in those policies, why are they valuable, and who and how is involved in the process. The process of ascribing values is among the principles of the Faro Convention signed in 2005 during the Faro National Capital of Culture. Values are ascribed by people. Therefore, as more diverse people are involved, more perspectives over heritage arise. Planning tools should illustrate this diversity of heritage categories, attributes, and values. If not, they are not a tool toward the solution, but part of the. Again, the more diversity in policy-making process, covering multidisciplinary fields and communities, the more transparent and efficient policies and less heritage marginalization. Faro, along with the Porto, is one of our national case studies and has been working hard to place culture at the core of its global development. We believe that these research outcomes may help cities like Faro and its local authorities to increase their awareness about how to build more inclusive and efficient urban planning policy. And on this way, to mitigate conflicts, misunderstandings, and the chance to lose valuable heritage, even when the material elements are preserved. Besides, we also consider that the data produced with these studies might be useful to build and inform future decision-making tools integrated into digital devices or platforms. A step forward to build smarter, resilient, and sustainable cities as advocated by later international recommendations such as the Historic and Urban Landscape Approach or the Agenda 2030. Thank you for listening to it, and I'm eager to see you all next year at the Faro Convention International Conference here in sunny Faro. See ya!
Hello everyone, I'm Milin, a PhD candidate affiliated to Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands. This research is under the supervision team led by Professor Dr. Anna Pereira-Rodas, and also this research is supported by the Ministry of Education of Republic of China, Taiwan. This research is dedicated to reveal and discuss the trends of concepts and their relations within the redesign projects. The main objective is to develop a theoretical framework for better identifying and comparing redesign categories and strategies considering the aims, actions, attributes, and values. Using a selected case study and international competition within Asia context through survey to compare different redesign categories created by different design teams of diverse cultural backgrounds. The problem field of redesign is that there is an inconsistency in terminology. What is the difference between conservation and preservation? And also, tendentious judgment of the concepts. For example, restoration project respects more of the history than the adaptive reuse project. This is what we often hear. The definition is often omitting, either in the international level, national level, or even in local level. The theory of their relation is not always matching in the reality. In order to better understand the definition, after a systematic literature review, 2 gaps were found that needs to be filled in. Although levels, skills, activities, and aims have been mentioned in the chapters, they have seldom been identified in the classification of redesign categories and strategies. And also, Although cultural significance is often mentioned in literature to affect the redesign, it is often in narratives. So far, there's no research could be found that has systematically analyzed redesign categories and strategies integrating attributes and values. In order to fill the gap, these research form a theoretical framework to build up a new definition method by breaking down the categories into the related strategies, avoiding the traditional way of defining using one term to describe another. And also, by filling the second gap, this theoretical framework will also form a new criteria to systematically research on attributes and values to the redesigned categories and strategies. The research question of this research is, what are the redesign strategies that define and categorize the redesign of built heritage, comparing theory and practice? What's the terms, their relations and connotations? And what are the aims, actions, attributes, values involved? This research will especially bring the scientific and societal impact on the decision-making in the heritage management process, positioning approaches, comparing with others. This research would also have the potential of developing a tool for measuring the redesign strategies. Imagine this redesign strategy compass can compare the different definition between different stakeholders from different world regions. This research used a qualitative content analysis method to extract the content and terms from selected paragraph, which implied the four aspects. So after a series of identification and translation, we would know the information and then recategorize them into the four aspects. Take one of the data resources, for example, Data 1 from the International Doctrinal Document. So far, 51 documents have been selected. And in order to reach a comprehensive discussion, a broad time period was covered from the announcement by Ruskin of SBAB in 1877 to Leeuwarden Declaration in 2018. And also, a wide geographical spread of the charters also included, from Europe to America to Asia to Pan-Pacific. And so far, in the Data 1 International Doctrinal Document, there has been 32 redesigned concepts have been identified in each of the documents. Let's take a look from the most referenced concept. Take conservation and preservation, for example. Conservation sometimes mentioned as a broader concept which includes many other concepts as a process. On the contrary, it is sometimes mentioned as relatively short-term activities involving in the preservation process. And also, in some English countries, the term preservation is used as an alternative to conservation for these general activities. So what's the differences between conservation and preservation? Although the question is very difficult to fully answer at this moment, but if you see from the aspect of the values, in the green line, conservation has highly mentioned in the perspective of scientific values and social values. And also, in the aesthetical values, conservation has much less mentioned than the concept of preservation and restoration. According to the analysis from the previous page, you can already see how diverse the different terms are from a single aspect. As a reflection from Faro Convention, this framework will form a common ground for the heritage communities to dialogue, participate, protect, define, and manage our cultural heritage. This research is not looking for the best or the most accurate definition, but to create another way of reading the redesigned concepts, to understand how and what form our built environment. Thank you for listening, and see you in Faro.
The approach to the meaning legacy led us to recognize that the cultural marks resulting from this economic activity are extensive in time and space, both around the extractive activity and around the activities that allow the daily life of the mining workers, or around other activities arising from the production of energy from coal that is extracted in the Douro coal basin. Observing these marks, we can say that the energy production line is also a territory production line. Under this systemic version, we identify the Douro coal system. Marked temporarily between the first coal exploration of this basin and the last one to cease working, it results from the articulation of the coal extraction points along the Douro coal basin, between them and with domestic heating systems, thermoelectrical plants and industrial structures, mainly in Porto. This social-technical system assumes a cultural dimension because of its territorializing character and, particularly around the exploration nuclei, because it reveals the main structure of routing and acculturation. With the end of the exploration, the referential depth work constituted by the meaning context starts to be thought in the iconic elements today little or nothing integrated in the daily life of these territories. They are expectant structures with a monumental image that for their functional characters are symbols of a culture rooted in the place, evoking the hard world of the work of minds. In fact, today the cultural dimension of heritage is still approached as an event, transporting itself into a space only as an object independently of the scale assumed. On the one hand, the idea of culture is manifested almost always in events taking place in a given space. On the other hand, many of the interventions that start from a heritage framework are subjugated to the physical characteristics of the marks, particularly the plastic ones, incurring such interventions in failure because limited to the search from past image legend of the organic dynamics of daily life. In this process, the marks that appear not to be part of a heritage order are automatically excluded, dropping into oblivion the places of exploration that are the everyday references that support their cultural recognition. An intrinsic evaluation of the meaning legacy, radically supported in its value as a structure of acculturation, may be an alternative bringing the potential to emerge in the present and in the public sphere, aggregating references able to cite the history and take it as a resource for the present requirements. On this perspective, the heritage gains relevance as a device for the qualification of the territories formerly determined by the exploration. Even more, if we are able to recognize in the heritage a reference or enhancer of the territorial planning and of the architectural intervention. It is an assignment of value not restricted to the morphologies that result from this system, contributing for it the logics that support the material part of it and the links that are established among themselves. We assume, therefore, a prospective vision of heritage based on the maintenance of the structural character of the places, understood as a matrix for a sustainable qualification of the territory and, consequently, local development.
My name is Kumar Poddar, and I'm an early stage researcher at the Dillon Academy in Israel and a doctoral candidate at the Faculty of Architecture and Built Environment TU Delft. My research is supported by the headline ITN, and I present to you today Datascaping Historic Urban Landscapes for Sustainable Planning. Throughout past decades, data on culture sector as well as operational activities have underscored that culture can be a powerful driver for development with community-wide social, economic, and environmental impacts. As Matheson puts it, that cultural matters are integral parts and cannot be ignored in the world of development. The annual elements that make up a city, the relations between them and the causal pathways that give it identity and characteristics remain difficult to describe, map, and analyze fully. This problem is intensified in contemporary cities, which are frequently characterized by increasing social, economic, political, and spatial fragmentation. While the question remains that what is the means to bridge this gap and document the landscape of the new massive vision? Here I quote Marcel Proust. The real voyage of discovery consists not in looking in new landscapes, but in having new eyes. The Convention on Value of Cultural Heritage for Society, the Faro Convention, states the need for enriching processes of economic, political, and social cultural development and promoting integrated approaches and reinforcing social cohesion with the objective of enhancing the quality of contemporary additions without endangering its cultural values. The three pillars of this research, the how, the datascaping, the what of historic urban landscapes, and why, the need for sustainable planning. The three main steps in this research and methodology is use of digital technology such as GIS and digitizing archival records, using the attributes of a historic urban landscape approach of UNESCO beyond the protected historic ensemble, and the new urban agenda, which underlines the linkages between good urbanization and job creation and livelihood opportunities. Taking the case study approach, this research is based on the case of Jaffa, which is an ancient Arab port town in Israel, which is now within the metropolis of Tel Aviv-Yafo municipality, and which was once a thriving port, and now a marginalized and a fragmented mix. Tel Aviv-Yafo is a dynamic yet contradicting urban reality owing to the historical and political events. Jaffa underwent a process of modernization during the British administration, which led to the marginalization of the derelict old Arab port town and propelling the modern Tel Aviv city to the forefront. The social-spatial transformations of Tel Aviv-Yafo made it into an urban power-station zone with physical and cognitive boundaries impacting the urban planning and heritage management processes. The social composition of Jaffa is a representation of shifting demographies and has a bearing on its social, cultural, and spatial configurations. The social-spatial configuration of Jaffa's town center were interwoven with the narrative of landscape and its evolving land uses. The grandiose of the port town were demonstrated by grand palatial houses, having elaborate enclosures, orange groves, well structures, water channels, pump systems built by its wealthy residents. The historic urban landscape of Jaffa is the urban area understood as the result of historic layering of cultural and natural values and attributes extending beyond the notion of the historic center of the ensemble. This research attempts to study the landscape through digital layering of archival maps, current land use patterns, and impacts of contemporary planning practices. As I explore datascaping as an operative tool for sustainable planning, there are three steps that I include in this method: is the use of technology such as GIS, georeferencing with digital means, use of pluralist data sets and multi-layer datascaping attributes, and use of archival information such as maps, images, and literature. As an example, I assess the drastic spatial alterations in land use patterns and its bearing on the social-cultural significance of the historic urban environment by comparing the archival 1932 photograph with the present-day simplex map, which is a 3D image image of the Jaffa city. It was evident through the comparison of archival photographs and current photographs, and comparing the attributes of the historic center, the pathways, the orange groves, and the open spaces. It shows the drastic transformation and loss of socio-cultural significant areas of this historic urban environment. This loss of vegetation of the orange groves and the plantations and green cover was also very evident by comparison of the archival photographs to the current spatial configurations within these areas. This led me to further exploration of archival maps and current land use planning maps. By use of pluralist datascapes of the 1930 archival map showing orange groves, practical representation of the HUL attributes, and overlaying it with the Google Earth image and the current land use map of the municipality shows that the orange groves or the historic socio-cultural configurations have not been included. Another example of use of pluralist datascapes in exercise to portray the partition zone and highlighting conflicting narratives through use of 1940 survey map and a map of self-guided tour in Ajami in this neighborhood. This shows that the Arabic cultural landscape, which includes historic neighborhoods and orange orchards, are hardly promoted. Throughout recorded history, cities have been studied, planned, imagined as places whose form and structure can be represented in models, maps, and pictures. And documenting landscapes as an anecdote to spatial memory, identity, transition has the potential for reconnaissance of values, attributes, and drivers of change. To conclude, I quote, historical change is not the time for sentimentality about what is at risk of being lost, but for learning, creativity, and reinvention. This exercise is to enhance our understanding of challenges to urban design and planning for social inclusion and sustainable economic growth, and future initiatives could thereby be motivated by interpretive datascaping.
Hello everyone, my name is Federica Marulo and I'm a PhD student at TU Delft and the University of Naples. With my thesis, I investigate the possible strategies for preserving historical systems. In particular, the research is based on the comparison of Italian and Dutch experiences with the revitalization of military systems. For this reason, the 19th century military systems of the new Dutch waterline and the entrenched field of Mestre have been selected as case studies. Their revitalization shows several differences stemming from the different models for landscape appreciation and protection developed in the two countries in the last century. Indeed, the landscape concept, now conceived as the synthesis of nature and culture, is a recent outcome. The historical separation between these two domains has left some traces, especially in the different relationship established on a national base between landscape heritage and architectural heritage. Within this frame, historic systems represent a relevant observatory, for their being at the crossroads of landscape and architectural heritage. The main research question is thus aimed at investigating the possible ways in which the synthesis between nature and culture can be turned into preservation strategies. The methodology is composed by the historical investigation of the two landscape models in their relationship with architectural heritage. It is then followed by the cross-reading of the case studies, which are analyzed in three main scales, namely the whole system, the force, and the built heritage. Even if the themes of the Faro Convention are not directly addressed in the main research question, the two case studies can give some hints for a reflection on this topic. So I have summarized the main aspects arising from the comparison in the following slides. Keeping in mind that these two revitalization processes got started before the Faro Convention, if we look at the strategies put in place at the scale of the overall system, a first difference can be observed in the way of dealing with public participations in the two contexts. In the Dutch case, the revitalization of the new Dutch waterline is the result of a governmental initiative. The military system was indeed selected as the first pilot project in the Belvedere National Program, aimed at fostering a better integration of heritage preservation in spatial planning. Despite the emphasis given to local identity in this national program, the selection of the pilot project and of the Belvedere areas was mainly based on already existing regional inventories and on the consultation of experts in the field of archaeology, history of architecture, and cultural geography. This top-down approach has then led to the development of a master plan for the revitalization of the waterline, in which several stakeholders were consulted. In relation to the local artifacts, the choice was made to turn one of the forts into a pars pro toto, while leaving more room to the owner's aspirations in the other fort sites. Differently, in the Italian case, the revitalization of the entrenched field of Mestre started from local initiative. Indeed, after the loss of the military function, several local associations were founded by citizens for claiming the reuse of the forts in their neighborhood. Started as sparse initiatives, the different local entities then joined forces in a bigger association in order to raise the attention of the municipality of Venice and work together with the local authority to a master plan for the revitalization of the overall military system. From this attempt, some guidelines were outlined as a preparatory step, but an actual master plan was never drafted. Indeed, the role of the local association started to be gradually diminished, and the municipality concentrated the most of its efforts on the oldest and more representative of the fort sites. Within this frame, also the choices made at the scale of the single forts are interesting to analyze in relation to the different strategies put in place for public engagement. The two forts selected as the most representative in the two analyzed revitalization processes are here taken as a reference. In the Dutch case, the project implemented for the revitalization of Fort Bijvechten shows a clear narrative strategy in which land art interventions served as tools for engaging the visitors into the most relevant aspects of this historical site and of the overall waterline. Examples of this approach can be found in the new entrance, designed as a cut in the fort walls to experience how impregnable it was, as well as in the selection of a strip in which the fort has been brought back to its original configuration, but also in the Waterline Museum, where a big model of the new Dutch waterline has been realized. More recently, the Waterline Visitor Center has also opened up to the use of digital tools for an augmented experience of the fort and the waterline landscape. An example of this is in the exhibition The Dutch Waterline Through a Different Lens, now available at Fort Bijvechten. For what the Italian case is concerned, a different approach was implemented in the revitalization of Fort Marghera. Here, a strong emphasis can be observed on the material preservation of the historical buildings on the fort sites, which were the object of an in-depth investigation. Accordingly, the strategy put in place consisted in the identification of 3 clusters for cultural and creative activities, which directly stemmed from the previous analysis of the historical buildings and their possible degree of transformation. Apart from opening again the fort to the public, no specific strategy can be observed for civic engagement. In conclusions, historic systems represent a complex and relevant case in which the definition of cultural heritage and heritage community introduced by the Faro Convention need to be tested at different and interconnected levels. Extremely relevant is then the role that digital tools can play for an augmented accessibility, especially in the case of landscape structures with a wider territorial extension.
Greetings everyone, my name is Bruna Nunes. I am a PhD candidate at the UNESCO Chair Heritage and Values, Heritage and Reshaping of Urban Conservation for Sustainability based at TU Delft. In this video, I will present my research titled Surveying Regional Architecture for Cultural Significance, mapping the network and the footprint of the Inquérito Arquitetura Regional Portuguesa in Portugal and abroad, and how it can be of use to the Faro Convention. My research departs from the concept of cultural significance, defined as aesthetic, historic, scientific, social, or spiritual value for past, present, or future generations. These values are considered to be embodied in the place and dependent on the individuals or groups. Complementarily, vernacular heritage was also recognized as the bearer of local or regional character that translates in the informal transmission of knowledge from generation to generation, so being related with how communities and to how each individual associates it with value. The combination of both brought me back to the 20th century surveys on vernacular architecture and got me thinking what their role and contribution could be towards the contemporary understandings and interpretations of heritage. These surveys were conducted internationally and in Portugal at regional and national scales, and they were motivated by a variety of reasons. For instance, some by ideological and/or architectural narratives, and others by the urge to recognize, to document, and to protect vernacular architecture and anonymous architectural contributions. These surveys evolved in a parallel with the concept of heritage, and were important to spark and enrich the debates around the topic, its shapes and definitions. And among these initiatives appears the Survey on Portuguese Regional Architecture, or Inquérito Arquitetura Regional Portuguesa, which I will address from now on. The YARP survey was condensed in a book that was first published in 1961, and it has for the past 60 years served as a reference for Portuguese architects, considering its contribution to the emerging dialogues between modern and local architecture. It translates in an architectural mapping made between 55 and 61 by 18 architects who traveled the country searching for the variety and richness of Portuguese regional architecture. They were split into 6 teams: Minho, Trás-os-Montes, Beiras, Extremadura, Alentejo, and Algarve, and they covered the entire Portuguese territory. 60 years of historical research have revealed important information on the theoretical framework and fieldwork methodology of these architects, and it eventually became famously known as a Trojan horse, as it was associated with an attitude of resistance from modern architects against nationalist propaganda. But I would like to focus more specifically on the results, on the contributions, as different regional and vernacular categories emerge from them. They focused on landscapes, the variety and diversity of architectural typologies, constructive techniques, but there's also been in the YARP a particular focus on the social and ethnographical view of the territory. Reflecting on the testimonies that I have collected, we can refer to this survey as a way of recognition of resources inherited from the past, revealing people's identity, values, beliefs, knowledge, traditions, and the connection between people and places. But these words are not mine nor theirs. In fact, these are from what we know as the Faro Convention. As I hope you can see by now, I'm trying to point out that we move in circles in a tight net, and the way in which we relate with others, the concepts that guide us, and the footprints we leave for decades, if not for centuries, all verge simultaneously on repetition, but sometimes also on broken links. for the YARP architects to retain the social character of vernacular matter because in a very assertive way they perceived that it was through the social character that they were able to bridge the shared source of remembrance, understanding, identity, and cohesion in the vernacular architecture. And this goes particularly well with the Faro Convention in the sense that it encourages us to recognize that cultural heritage matters, particularly if we associate the objects and their meanings and the uses that people associate with these objects with the values that they convey, and we now have clear frameworks on values. In my research, I apply oral history as a core method, as it allows me to cross-reference the contents of literature, archival materials, and the testimonies of the architects involved in the YARP survey. It is about bridging their narratives to a contemporary understanding, but this implies an updated interpretation of these elements and these narratives. And to bring old narratives to a contemporary setting is one possible way through which we can bridge past and future voices and experiences while performing an alternative application of historical contributions. I would like us to ask, what did they value, why did they value, and compare this with the what do we value now? I have been applying the same methods in the classification process of the personal archive of António Menezes since 2019, and this work has allowed me so far to map not only the contents of the photos, but more excitingly, what they mean and how complex the connections of this archive are to other places, people, and events. And while I'm about to finish my presentation, I will address a last question, this time to Faro. What if we could travel in time and find these very links between the YARP survey, the people involved, their concepts and values in the south of Portugal? Faro, let's find your cultural significance footprint together. I hope you enjoyed my presentation, and naturally, I hope you have a lot of questions you would like to discuss about it. If you would like to find out a little bit more, I will leave you my contact details, and hopefully I will see you in Faro next year.
For the last 20 years, I have been working as an architect in municipal teams, planning, designing, building, in simple terms, managing the transformation of a city. That became gradually my expertise and my main concern. How can we manage places, making them better? Managing urban transformation here implies dealing both with the outstanding and the ordinary, considerations of subjective nature, and that imply dealing within a democratic framework and tackling the most urgent needs, namely the citizens' needs. Great impact urban transformations are widely known related to big operations, great events, and star system architects. That's not the scope of this research. Quite the opposite, although potentially complementary, focusing on a long-term collective operation concerning quotidian needs and current resources. So, is it possible to produce long-term effective impacts, both materially and immaterially, on a site and its users by managing the ordinary? The process implemented by a municipal team in the city of Guimarães concerning the recovery of the historical city center may present findings and answers to this question, not only in methodological procedures, but also by an architectural design theory that in my perspective has been tested and proven effective. The process and the research starts in 1983 with the foundation of the team and goes on until 2001, year in which the site was inscribed in the UNESCO World Heritage List, although this inscription was not an initial objective of the operation. Among other aspects are analyzed the methods and instruments adopted, the written documental production, the built results, comparative analyses are made in different typologies, namely housing, public buildings, public spaces, normative, and planning instruments. Methodological aspects must be clarified. How did this process started? Which first steps? How to delimit an intervention area? First results. How does the process grew up, which corrections were adopted, and so on. An architecture design theory is also under the scope of the research, as it seems quite obvious that the quality of the results depend upon it. A great number and diversity of architects and typologies were involved throughout time, and so questions need answer. Are there common patterns in the design and construction criteria? What stands out for everyone as relevant? Are there patterns among the differences when in comparison with analogous cases elsewhere? The research is fundamentally based on what has actually been formally assumed and built. So the main sources of information are the built work, administrative files, and the drawing and photograph archives. Access to the administrative information has been granted, allowing to digitally scan several thousands of documents related to all administrative processes, making possible the understanding of the criteria adopted for each typology of problems as long as they appear in this dynamic process. The urban area managed over this period considers approximately 2,000 buildings, almost all documented in different periods. Several thousand photos, mostly printed, that have been scanned within the research, allowing its study and comparative analysis throughout the years. A short comment on the still difficult access to information, as we are studying a period that is not yet adequately achieved. On the other hand, as time goes by, information tends to become more fragmented and less organized. This applies especially to photographs. On the other hand, many of the architectural production was not based on formal drawings, but in a systematic monitoring and direction of the construction inside. This turns the photo archives as unique testimonies in many cases. This research may be extremely relevant to all who work in or with city management, not only in listed sites. The learnings that emanate from this long process and its results are much wider and share a theoretical positioning that many contemporary architects promote, even in other geographies than Portugal. Architecture in this sense is a cultural positioning, more. As established by the Faro's Convention, the role of cultural heritage relates with the construction of a peaceful and democratic society and with the process of sustainable development and the promotion of cultural diversity. In Guimarães, this conception of cultural heritage has been clearly demonstrated. A great consensus exists on how well the city has been taken care of. One must remember that was due to this long-lasting quotidian process that Guimarães achieved the UNESCO listing or was chosen as European Capital of Culture in 2012. Although usually studied as a process of urban conservation and therefore under the criteria of heritage safeguard charters, the findings from this research are expected to be much more universal concerning the management of a city, a town, a building, a street, or simply a place, regardless its boundaries. Just a few decades ago, the historical center was pointed as shameless and useless. Nowadays, that's not a fact. Considering this shift, what happened in Guimarães that is not seen in other towns? How can we learn and evolve from it? That's what I expect to find and communicate by this research.
Good day, I'm Nadia Pintossi, a PhD candidate at the Eindhoven University of Technology. In essence, my research is about identifying challenges to the adaptive reuse of cultural heritage and possible solutions to them. Before diving into it, let's start with the bigger picture. What is the adaptive reuse of cultural heritage? It's a practice that extends properties' physical and social functions by giving them a new purpose while conserving their values and attributes. Hence, adaptive reuse is recognized as a strategy to conserve the built cultural heritage. By prolonging the lifespan of heritage and its material, it contributes to circular economy and circular cities, and to fight climate change by addressing issues including resource scarcity and waste production prevention. Yet, the implementation of the adapted areas of cultural heritage presents challenges. Good news! These barrier, obstacle, constraints, if addressed, become opportunities to facilitate adaptive reuse, conserving heritage, and favoring the realization of its potential for sustainable development, circular cities, and fighting climate change. Some challenges are known and acknowledged in the literature. However, knowledge can be further in terms of point of view of some stakeholders, context, and scales considered. This doctoral research adds to the knowledge on challenges by engaging various stakeholders, such as local authorities, NGOs representatives, and researchers. This complements the valuable point of view of architects and project managers. This research also expands the variety of contexts considered by investigating as case studies the three cities of Amsterdam in the Netherlands, Rijeka in Croatia, and finally Salerno in Italy. It broadens this research focus on challenges beyond the site and the site scales by adopting a holistic and integrated approach based on the historic urban landscape approach and a multi-scale perspective. For example, it considers the urban scale too. Data were collected during stakeholder engagement workshops. A wide variety of stakeholders participated in a roundtable discussion, identifying challenges and solutions, guided by the sixth step of the historic urban landscape approach. They also took a multi-scale perspective, considering sites and urban scale, along with general considerations. The data then were analyzed by content analysis, both with inductive and deductive coding, and synthesized by frequency and thematic synthesis. First, the case were studied individually, and then a comparative study was performed. The individual studies provide evidence of the challenges and possible solutions in those contexts, add challenges to the already known, and reveal a complex system of interrelated challenges and solutions. They cover several themes, including participation, knowledge production, capacity for the adapted areas of cultural heritage. This further understanding highlights the opportunities to facilitate the adapted reuse of cultural heritage by giving insights for policy and decision making, and room for being proactive to those actors that are implementing this kind of practices. Particularly, challenges are also urban and not only site-specific. Some are common to various practices and not heritage-specific, such as participation-related challenges also encountered in urban planning and climate change adaptation. This suggests addressing some of these challenges in a multi-scale and integrated manner. Then, the comparative study identifies common challenges, furthering the understanding of challenges to a higher order of findings, going from the localized and contextual problem towards a generalization, enabling the formulation of a framework that can inform policy and decision-making, research and practice. Now, let's look into how this research relates to the Faro Convention. The Faro Convention encourages everyone to participate in the reflection and debate on the opportunities and challenges which the cultural heritage represents. This research tried to do this by focusing on the adapted areas of cultural heritage. Also, the Faro Convention is about the contribution of cultural heritage to society. This research enables this contribution by attempting to facilitate heritage conservation through its adaptive reuse. No conservation, no contribution. Finally, challenges highlighted issues that align with themes and principles of the Convention, and at times solutions to address them. For example, often the access to information relating to cultural heritage is a challenge that can be resolved by open access and digitalization of such information. What about Faro and alike mid-sized cities? This research might be of interest to them because the identified challenges and solutions might be transferable, particularly those from the city of Rijeka and the city of Salerno, both coastal mid-sized cities as Faro. For example, in Rijeka, some interventions of reuse were challenged by the contested nature associated with heritage. The suggested solution was to engage citizens in creating narratives acknowledging such controversy. To note that the city of Rijeka was busy at the time to prepare as European Capital of Culture 2020, so some findings are also relevant, and also be relevant for this reason. That's all from me. Thank you very much for listening, and a big thanks to all those people that made this research possible, particularly the stakeholders that participated in the workshop. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Hello, I'm Ilera Rossetti. I'm a PhD candidate in Heritage Studies.
Thank you all so much for your presentations and congratulations for the work being done so far, your enthusiasm, and in particular, your effort on articulating your research with the Faro Convention and the digital era. Now we will shift to the Zoom meeting and we will stop the streaming so that we can have a better interaction with you. And in a minute, I will introduce the three professors that will be debating and discussing with you. In the meantime, I will introduce them. So first, we are delighted to have here Ana Catarina Marado, and she's a researcher at the Center for Social Sciences Studies at the University of Coimbra, the SES, and she has postgraduate education and technical training qualifications in architecture, cultural heritage, urban studies, and territorial planning, and holds a PhD in architecture from the University of Seville. She is also an invited assistant professor at the Faculty of Human and Social Sciences of the University of Algarve since 2007, and she has broad-reaching research experience on monastic architecture, heritage, and their relationships with the urban environment across different geographic and chronological contexts. Thank you so much, Professor Catarina, for being here with us. And also, I'd like to introduce again Professor Ana Pereira Roders. That is currently Professor in Heritage and Values, UNESCO Chair on Heritage in the Reshaping of Urban Conservation and Sustainability at the TU Delft. Ana graduated as an architect at University Lusíada in 2002, obtained a PhD in Building Technology in 2007 in the TUE. She worked at universities in the Netherlands, Portugal, Belgium, UK, Mozambique, and on. Her contributions to science known to be innovative, interdisciplinary, and methodical, and disseminated in hundreds of publications and events. And in 2015, Ana gave a TED Talk in Hamburg on how cities become resource efficient. Award-winning researcher, a partner in research projects, and Ana is a regular assessor of research proposals and outcomes to fund institutions, academic publishers, and universities. And here today, undertaking an agreement between the TU Delft, they have a chair, and the municipality of Faro. Thank you, Ana, for discussing here with us, with the PhDs. And lastly, Teresa Cunha Ferreira, that is online with us. Hey, Teresa. Teresa holds a degree in architecture at the Faculdade de Arquitetura da Universidade de Porto, FAUP, and PhD at Polytechnic of Milan, and a postdoc also at FAUP. She has professional experience in the Direção Regional de Edifícios e Monumentos do Norte and Superintendência Peribene Arquitetônica e Paesaggio de Milano, among other consultancy, collaborations, and works. In 2009, she joined the Centro de Estudos de Arquitetura e Urbanismo, the FAUP, and where she develops research activity, namely the coordination and participation in projects, organization of scientific events, conferences, lectures, and publications in national and international context. She has been developing research in the fields of history, theory, and architectural heritage design, as well as management, among others. Thank you so much, Teresa, for joining us online from Porto, and welcome the PhD candidates that just presented and these amazing videos. We also have some invitees from all over the world that might be joining. So I would like to pass the word then to Professor Catarina Marado to pose a general question to the PhDs or a specific question or a comment. So that you would have 5-6 minutes to do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bruno. Good morning to all. First, I would like to thank the invitation to be part of this event and to be part also of this discussion with the PhD students. Also to congratulate the Faro municipality for this initiative and all the institutions that were involved in it and all the people that organized this warm-up for the Faro Convention. Well, regarding the research projects that were presented by the PhD, and I want to congratulate them for the videos they present. I would like to say that first, I would like to say that I was very impressed with the high quality of the proposals that were sent. And I think that in general, they respond to the challenge that were presented in the call. Well, I have some questions, and I will start with at least one of them. I don't know if all the participants are present, but I have one question to some of the PhD students, namely to those whose research projects are more directly related to the topic of public participation, that I think is one of the most significant contributions of the Faro Convention in the way it involves civic society and cultural heritage management process. So I would like to ask, maybe I think Clara, I don't know if they all are present, but Clara, Hilaria, and Mada to comment on how or if they are addressing or planning to address in their research projects the diversity of communities that are connected to cultural heritage and their different interpretations and even contradictory values that they ascribe to the same cultural heritage assets, well, by different communities. So I would like, I don't know if they are present, but some of them can.
I can see Hilaria is present. Magda just joined. I don't know if she got the question. And Clara, I don't see her yet, but maybe Hilaria, if you would like to comment and reply to Professor.
Maybe we can double check because there have been some comments that they cannot hear us. If they... Okay,
let's just then, on a good point, let's double check if the PhDs are listening to us. Can you reply? Can you hear us? Bruna, Hilaria?
Otherwise, they might have to put a parallel and just watch it through YouTube, because I saw some messages that they are listening through YouTube.
So we are having some technical adjustments here. So you can listen to us from the streaming, but not from the Zoom. Is that it?
Yeah. We can only hear you on YouTube.
Oh, now we can hear you.
Not
Otherwise, they might have to put a parallel and just watch it through YouTube.
Yeah.
Because I saw some messages that they are listening through. Some messages that they are listening through YouTube.
Yeah, we missed the previous part.
Hear you on YouTube.
Oh, now we can hear you.
On Zoom, we can hear no.
Otherwise, they might have to put a parallel and just watch it through YouTube.
Yeah.
Because I saw some messages they are listening through.
Okay, thank you so much. So I would kindly like to ask Professor Catarina to repeat the question so that you can now all tune exciting to reply. Thank you so much.
Well, again, My question was not to all the
Can you
PhD
speak now
students.
to see if we can listen, please? Not yet? Not yet, okay. We have to try with the YouTube.
But they're able to hear from YouTube.
But
Eu fico com o fone aqui aberto, é isso?
Do computador. Liga o microfone do computador.
Ah, mas eu...
Tens que ligar o Zoom.
Ah, eu tenho que ligar o Zoom. Então eu tenho que receber o link,
Tens
eu não
que
sei, eu não
entrar
tenho
no
link.
O link está naquele... Tu mandaste um e-mail que tinha o link. Eu recebi um e-mail que tinha...
Alguém pode me enviar o link, então?
Eu acho que todos recebemos.
Você me encaminha, então, o link?
Eu não vi bem, mas acho que era. Olha, é este. Tu não recebeste este e-mail. Bruno de Andrade, foste tu. Aqui não tem o link?
Não.
Não. Este.
Vai me enviar? Uhum.
Não, este não era ele.
So I'd like to just ask for a few seconds so we can adjust this.
Challenges of technology now.
I can go to Zoom, but I need the link. Just a few more seconds, please.
But they can still hear us in the YouTube, right? So if you need to nod if you can hear us in YouTube. No.
There is a 15 seconds delay.
Oh, 15 seconds delay. Okay.
You have to wait 15 seconds for the response.
It's not a problem for such big distance they are from us.
Me envia por e-mail?
Yeah, they are nodding, they are nodding.
Eu recebi agora o e-mail.
Yeah. Yay, Bruno is entering.
Okay, let's try this. E agora? Parece que funciona. Aí esse microfone tá ligado. Alô, testando.
If they seja responsável. Não tens que escrever.
Deixa eu ligar.
Tá ligado o meu som agora. Um, dois, teste. Desligar tudo.
Não, é memorizar.
Bruna, Hilaria, Marla, can you? Eu tô com medo de falar.
É Hilária, sim.
Hello everyone. Can I go
Yeah.
and try to answer the question from the perspective of my research? I can't hear anyone at the moment, nor on YouTube or Zoom. So if you can hear me, please stop me somehow. Okay. So in my research, I explored the differences of different stakeholders, and of course this entails also the differentiation of communities in different. So both at the international level, when I work with rare heritage cities, but especially at the local level now, then working on the case study of Antwerp, and different stakeholders, so not only communities come with their own values and different point of view processes and, as we said, perspectives. So I hope I will indeed be able to to draw some conclusions on, concerning this topic in my research. Um, and especially at the local level, I expect some interesting data also to come up concerning the contradictory values and how this affect the whole participation process and decision making.
Can I go next, as the question was only for Ilaria, me, and Clara, and I can't see Clara, so I hope you can hear me all. Yes, thank you for the good question. Actually, in my research, this is kind of the main focus of my project. I'm trying to find out the opinions of different stakeholders, including locals, tourists, authorities, and experts, and to find out the conflictual opinions of them about the cultural significances, and finding out these conflicts hopefully can help me to and try to reach consensus among them. Yeah, this is the focus of my research, and I find it's very important in participatory practices, how to address these conflictual opinions among different stakeholders to reach consensus in decision making. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha.
Thank you, Martha.
A Clara tá por aqui?
Clara also, she's not here. Não está.
Então, Ana, agora seria a sua vez.
Queres que eu escreva?
Uhum, eu escrevo.
Podes escrever e podes falar no microfone, porque é que estás a escrever? Só que ao ouvido.
Ok.
Você vai falando e eu vou...
So I have a question, a general question, because you are mainly all or most of you with a background in architecture or urban planning or landscape architecture, and I wonder in this perspective, even if you're looking at heritage and some of you in participatory practices, I wonder if there is still not a tendency to always focus on more traditional categories of heritage, as the built environment, even the historic center, even if it's the broader, then it's again the landscape. And how do you see this shift, even in our own preparation and attention towards the events, the intangible heritage, the traditions, the minorities. We saw Ricardo talking about the ordinary, which is also very much the focus of the Faro Convention, to show all the different layers of heritage and not just the World Heritage, National Heritage, the most famous ones. So I wonder, your views based on this research, are we making progress on that level yet, or as a discipline are we still very old-fashioned yet, and then we need such a reform?
That? Were you able also to hear the question? question.
Yes.
Oh, such a pity. I did my best on writing down. I want to ask again.
But they can read it, right? Yeah.
So who's up for the challenge to take in this question?
Yeah, in terms of our discipline. Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Ricardo, yes,
Ricardo,
please.
Yeah.
Yes, I could listen to the question because I was listening to you too, because here in Zoom we cannot hear the questions. Anyway, if I understood the question in what concerns to my research, I don't have an answer, a clear answer, but because most of the terms that Anna spoke about are not completely clear to me. Even from the other research presentations, I don't know exactly what do you mean, precisely what you mean about participatory experiences. As for our experience in the practice, this means a lot of different things. So in practical terms, even the terminology regarding the historical city center, it's kind of dubious for me, because if from one hand it seems to be obviously related to cultural, high cultural historical heritage, artistical heritage, if you want to put it in that terms. In practical terms, for instance, in European cities, namely in Portugal, that concerns to many traditional long-term social problems regarding poverty, regarding social exclusion. And so dealing with historical city centers, it's not as obvious as sometimes it is put in the in many conventions, in many seminaries. So at the end, my answer is I would ask you to put the question in more precise terms, because I think for me they are very general, and so I cannot answer when they are so general. It must be more practical. I'm sorry.
Sorry, may I talk about the question?
Mona, excuse me, comment?
Am I audible?
May I?
Great.
Can you hear me?
So please first Komal react, and then you, Mona, please.
Okay.
Okay. So I would like to respond to Anna's question about how to consider the intangible aspects. So with respect to my research, this element is of the spirit and feeling. That's one of the attributes of historic urban landscapes. So I do not separate it from the physical attributes, but they are embedded within the physical. So if we talk about memory of the landscape, that's one of the core elements that need to be documented. So inclusion has to be embedded within these physical and not as a separate category of intangible, because that's how the whole fabric is built in urban cities. Thank you.
Thank you. I will answer it very briefly. As I said in my presentation, and as we can see in many projects, governmental or even researchers, the focus of these researchers are on the big cities. And when I saw the Faro Convention, I really shocked and surprised, because as I said, my case study is one of the small cities in the middle of Iran, and it has many valuable monuments, and they are unique even in Iran. And as I understood, people are so related. I mean, residents are very connected, and they are dependent on these valuable monuments, and they can't even live without them. And these monuments and these places and neighborhoods, historical neighborhoods, they prepare the context for their collective memory and their connections, and they can't even live without them. And I think if I want to answer the Dr. Roder's question, I think it's not old-fashioned. Yes.
Thank you so much, you all. So lastly, I'd like to pass the word to Professor Teresa.
Oh, can you hear me? Yes, okay,
Yes.
that's great. So, first of all, I would like to greet and congratulate for this initiative of the Municipal Council, the University of Algarve, and the TU Delft Chair on Heritage and Values. On behalf of our UNESCO Chair, Heritage Cities and Landscapes, Sustainable Management, Conservation, Planning and Design of the University of Porto, we are very honored to be an associate partner of this warm-up conference and also contribute with our PhD candidates from the PhD program of the Faculty of Architecture of the University of Porto. I would also like to congratulate all the speakers, the PhD candidates for the excellent presentations. It was a challenging task to make all to put all your research thesis in 6 minutes, and also relating with the Faro convention. So it will be really a hard work to choose only one ambassador for the next year conference. Now, turning back to the debate and to the Faro Convention, it's as it has been said today, it's a turning point, as previous documents such as the World Heritage Convention and many others don't appeal directly to the society, to the participation of the society. And what we have been witnessing is mostly top-down approaches in heritage practices rather than bottom-up or inclusive approaches. So, of course, this is, I always remember this very renowned book from Françoise Chouet, Allégorie du patrimoine, where she says that heritage must be a mirror of the society. However, she says that this mirror is often very full of narcissism or elitist perspectives. So, and that's why, again, the Faro Convention approach, it's important for empowerment and education and participation of the communities. I would like to ask you if you agree with Chouet, and if from your researches you felt at a certain moment that indeed people, this narcissism and more elitist approach, that people want to select an idealized past, or a very also without a truthful or a more rigorous analysis of what are the attributes, which are the attributes, which are the values. So it's I think it would be interesting also to hear from you, and what can we do with the hands-on and practical experience, as also Ricardo mentioned, to change this and to shift this paradigm and this approach. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you for your question, Teresa. I enjoyed particularly that you brought that reference and the word narcissistic to classify the way how we look at heritage, because well, especially into what is related to my research, and I am focusing on an historical event that happened 60 years ago, and what I'm trying to do is to map these understandings of heritage and to try to interpret what sometimes might end up to be a narcissistic way of looking at heritage. Because every time we interpret something, we put something that belongs to us in that interpretation. So of course, the interpretation and the way we classify things is affected by ourselves. And I would say that I agree with that, and that's also why I consider so important that not only we look at heritage today, what we have left from what we consider to be heritage in all dimensions, but also that we look at history with an updated perspective and with an updated narrative, and that we try to find the signals, the points where we get to connect with past narratives and where we find the same intentions and the same interests and the same concepts, even though, well, at least what is related with the IRP survey, which is my focus, the words were not the same. They were not talking about attributes and values. But if we do this effort of carefully analyzing what they wrote, what they said, and also in particular what was the outcome of this survey and what they did and how it was and how it affected their work and their actions later, we might be able to find some links and to identify this less narcissistic way of looking at heritage. Well, maybe we can find a more inclusive way at looking at heritage as something that has already been present for some decades now. But I would say that, and also taking a little bit of what I understood from Anna's question, I believe that we are still very much influenced by by the way we look at things, and we tend to interpret better and to understand better the things that we can touch probably and the things that are physical, and sometimes the intangible heritage makes it harder for us to understand it, or we have a bit of a difficulty to understand and to classify and to read values behind this intangible heritage. But I would also like to say that when we do this interpretation on historical documents, on past actions, and in my case, the networks and who is involved with what and why, we get to decode these values and these categories from that. But I would say that it is still work, there's still a lot of work to do in that sense. We get to bring those narratives to our time.
Thank you so much, Professor Teresa. Thank you for the answer, Bruna. And unfortunately, we need to wrap up the session. And must I remind you that this is just a warm-up for what's to come, and we will meet again in the afternoon and keep up with the discussions in the upcoming years. Thank you so much, you all, for the videos, for your great effort, for the professors here present, for the audience. And we're looking forward to interacting with you more in the afternoon, in the near future. Thank you so much, and see you soon.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to you all.
Thank you, everyone.